Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Friend Jody Lynn is taking the day off. She'll be back next week. She's dealing with some stuff in her business life, but at this point in time, we'll be loving having her back. And right now, we're just going to talk with our guest who's joining us today. Her name is Emily Sacco. And this is going to be an interesting conversation because she's a boudoir photographer. Ooh, okay. This is going to be good. Get a little spice going on here. And she's from Central Virginia, which, of course, I know a bit about because back when I was still married, Louise and I lived there for about 11 years. We were just chatting about that a bit. But Emily, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So much gratitude for you for asking me to be on your podcast. I'm doing really well. It's a beautiful day here. So when the sun is out, I'm smiling. So I'm doing well. How are you?
That's great. Excellent. Oh, the weather is gorgeous here. The house is open for the first time since the winter. So that's always a good thing. So yeah, life is good. Life is very, very good. And we're going to dig in a little bit more to find out just how good it can be. But give us a little bit of an autobiography. Give us an idea of where Emily Sacco has come from and how did you end up being a photographer and what kind of stuff are you doing these days?
Totally. I think when I look back on my life, I was always a photographer, but didn't really realize it. I started professionally in 2012 as a wedding photographer. So that's really where I got my feet wet. And during that time, I did some bridal boudoir and it was really fun. But it wasn't until a few years into it that I worked with women who weren't necessarily brides. So when you're doing bridal boudoir, it's very different than doing boudoir, say, with someone middle-aged, has some trauma, has had kids. Like she has a very different relationship with her body. So once I had that experience, I was really hooked. Like being able to show women that their bodies are beautiful art and like there's so much more to them than the way that they see themselves every day. It was amazing for me. So I transitioned into doing boudoir photography full time 2 years ago. And that's kind of, where I landed. I'm a busy mom also. So I have 2 children, 2 boys. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they keep me very busy. But my business is really like my oasis. It's where I go to be creative, to be myself, and really indulge in the feminine. So that's where we are now.
That's something that we talk about a lot, the idea of diving in and finding ways to do what you love. You found what you love. That, first of all, that's the biggest thing. Finding something that you really enjoy doing, that you love doing, and then you're doing it. And that's great.
And finding people who also, love what you do, which I think especially for the arts, it's so important. Like anyone in the arts, it's like if people don't care about what you do, unless you're independently wealthy, you can't do it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Absolutely true. Yeah.
So
What is it that draws your clients to wanting to have you do this kind of photography with them?
Yeah. I think when, a woman decides that she wants to do a boudoir shoot, the very first thing is to find the right photographer for her, right? So I'm very personal. Like that's something that's really important to me and my brand. And I talk a lot about self-love and the journey that, women have to go on. A lot of times when someone decides to do a boudoir photo shoot, it's really like their first step into this self-love, self-discovery journey that, they've really been waiting their whole life to go on, but they just, didn't know it yet.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. I can tell I'm going to be learning all kinds of interesting stuff during this conversation. Okay.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love doing about this show. I've had conversation. Well, you mentioned you started in 2012. That's when I started the podcast. Yeah. So I've been, the last 10 years, I've been just interviewing all kinds of people and getting all these wonderful perspectives and ideas and so forth. And I love it. I just absolutely love it. And I repeat that often. I think my listeners are kind of sick of me saying it, but I love all these different perspectives because I just learned so much from it. And I know I'm going to be learning more today too. So,
Yeah.
okay. So that gives us an idea of the lay of the land. But you mentioned the self-love piece, which by
Mhm.
the way is a big deal as far as I'm concerned. Really big deal. In fact, one of the things that I focus on a lot in my conversations with guests is that I personally believe that there are two primary factors that pretty much govern anything that we're going to be successful with or feel good about in life, whether it's career or relationship, money, health, it doesn't matter, anything, hobbies. And those two factors are self-love and our connections, our social connections. And when we can
Totally.
put those two things together, that's when the magic happens. So talk about that from your perspective, particularly with the photography, but also with just the general work that you do with women.
Yeah. Well, I think people don't really realize like how important self-love is.
Mhm.
And over the last like even 5 years, I think it's really come to light. Like we know a lot more about mental illness, and it's become like so much more acceptable to talk about it. And
Mm.
we know a lot more now that, self-love doesn't have to be like entirely selfish. And in
Right.
all reality, right, it's actually the opposite. Like when we show ourselves that we love, value, and care for ourselves, we're able to love, value, and care for everyone around us,
It's
right?
almost a requirement, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, if we want, you mentioned, if we want to like excel in anything in our lives, it really begins with us. It all starts, in our inner world. And then that's where it really comes out in our outer world. So, I mean, I think self love is just so important. I think it's something that is becoming more mainstream now, which is
True.
amazing, right? For me. And
Exciting. I love the fact that it's happening.
it's very exciting. We're in, the shift now where
Yeah.
people don't wanna work, like, crappy jobs. Like, people are becoming more awake and realizing, that they do have more choices and that it really starts with them and how they're going to view themselves, and then what at that point they can offer to the world is so different, and
Yeah.
to offer to their community, right, is so different than if they didn't do any of that introspective work, and if they're okay with most people treat themselves really poorly.
No
Right?
kidding. Yeah.
Most people are really hard on themselves and they don't give themselves credit where it's due. And that's
Yeah.
really the ultimate thing that's limiting them from living their true potential is this lack of self-love and self-appreciation.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to say is that if we treated our best friend the way we treated ourselves, we wouldn't have a best friend. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, that usually is the case. Somehow we get away with it with ourselves, but that's like you say, it's happening less and less. People are.
Absolutely.
It's almost like people are raising their standards. What's the phrase? Leveling up. That's the current phrase
Yes.
for that. You know.
Ve very much raising your standards, raising your boundaries, deciding I one of my favorite things to say is like, I actually believe that, being high maintenance is a good thing. Like if you are high maintenance and you have these non-negotiable pieces of your life and you hold yourself to a certain standard, you're going to be a much better person, like in all areas. You're going to be able to love deeper. You're going to be able to know yourself so much deeper. And you're going to be able to offer so much more to the world.
I love the way you're repurposing that phrase because that phrase high maintenance used to mean how you expect other people to take care of you. And now
Right.
it means, in the way you're phrasing it, and I love the way you're phrasing it, it means the high standards you're applying to yourself in terms of how you're going to take care of you. And that's an
Absolutely.
entirely different way of looking at it. And I love it.
Yes, absolutely. Just having, I like the phrase like non-negotiables. Like what in your life is a non-negotiable for you? And it could be anything and it could look very different to different people. And it's the same thing for self-love. Like how we celebrate ourselves, how we take care of ourselves is going to look very different for different people.
Yes.
But the results, what comes out of that is going to be the same.
And in your professional work, I mean, I know that you work with clients who are like you were describing. They're looking to start exploring more about their own self love, their own self appreciation. Starting in this particular case with the boudoir photography, but I also know you work with other photographers. Talk about that for a bit.
Yeah. Well, I love helping people find purpose in their life. So this kind of, ties into the whole thing. And we can very easily just sign up to like do a job and like do
Mhm.
a job well, even as a photographer. It's like you can fall into this path of not really being creative, not really
Mhm.
pushing yourself creatively. And just if we're looking at each client as like just the client that is going to pay us to do a service and then that's it, that's fine, if that's what you're cool with, but you're going to get burnt out. Like that's not something like you can't have this creative job and have it last and be fulfilled if you're just kind of running people through a mill.
Mm.
And you also can't really be distinguished in your field if you're not putting yourself out there, like in a way that's authentic to you, if you're not living, your true potential, right? So I love to help people discover, what makes you different as a boudoir photographer, because, we all are innately us. And that's our biggest superpower is being who we are. Like,
Mm.
we've heard it our whole lives.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things that you're like, okay, and not necessarily you, but some people, are like,
Oh,
okay,
probably me too, somewhere along the way, to be perfectly
right?
honest. I mean,
Well, and myself also. I mean, how many times have you heard like there's no one else in the world like you?
mm,
Right? Like we've heard
mhm,
that from grade school.
yep,
One of the things that's most amazing is that you are the only one like you. You're the only
mhm,
one with your DNA. You're the only one. You're the only one. And I think it's such a strong, powerful message because it is true. Like there's so much truth in that, but because we've heard it so many times and because we don't think, right? Most people don't think that they're incredible. And that's one of the things that holds a lot of people back. So I really
mm.
like to help other photographers find that special piece of them and to be able to live their authentic life. And as soon as they can tap into that, they're able to offer their clients so much more. So, there's so hundreds and hundreds of amazing photographers, but there's only one you.
Mm.
So, as something so personal as boudoir, we can really make this connection with our clients in a completely different way than we can do with any other type of photography. And I really like helping other photographers find that in themselves.
That's great. You're also using a word that has gained a lot of traction over the last 10 years or so, authenticity or being authentic.
Mm.
And I first of all, I like the fact that's happened. I also find it interesting though, because I think it's almost like the word gets used because I can't really think of another way to describe what I'm saying. So I'll just say authentic. So I'm
Mm.
going to kind of flip it around and say, well, Emily, what does authentic mean to you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, to me, being authentic is doing things because you want to do them and not because you want validation from other people.
That's great.
Like, right. So when we start doing things not to be seen, but because it's who we are, it's very different. It's a very different approach to sales. It's a very different approach to marketing. And it's a
Mhm.
very different approach as like a photographer sharing your work to say, this is who I am
Yeah.
versus, right, this is, what I can offer you. And this is like who I am. So to me, being authentic is doing things because you want to do them. You want to see them be done. And that's not to say that like other people aren't going to want to do the same things as you,
Sure.
because of course there's going to be people who have similar interests and things. But, if you can go to sleep at night and put your head on the pillow and not have any regrets, right? Because you did everything that felt good to you, that felt aligned with you and in your life, then like you're living the path that you're supposed to be living, you know?
Yeah, to borrow from the old Frank Sinatra song, "You did it your way," and that's
Yeah.
important.
Yes, exactly. Many holiday I'm Italian, so many holidays listening to Frank
Yeah,
Sinatra
there you go.
for sure.
Yeah, I think I always used the phrase "being true to yourself" as my way of expressing that, and that has, kind of evolved into this, use of the word authentic. But you're right, it is about identifying and living by who you really are. And
Totally.
and 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 that can take some work, let's be perfectly honest about that.
Oh, it never ends. That's the thing. Like, that's the internal work that
Mhm,
we have to do all day, every day till the end of time. But it's like the beautiful work. That's the
mhm.
part that makes life worth living. That's the part that makes people fall in love with you, is finding and discovering, what we love, and then we're able to share it with other people.
It's really falling in love with yourself. To follow up
Mhm.
on what you were talking about earlier, you have to love yourself before anybody else can love you, and that's where that comes from.
Totally.
It's
Well,
finding out, what do I love about myself? Why do I think I'm pretty good? You know, what
yeah.
Why should I celebrate me?
No, totally. And I mean, that's even like one of the phrases that we've heard a lot, right? Like you can't fully love someone else until you love yourself. And you're like, okay, I've heard that
Yeah,
before.
right.
But it's so true.
It's true. You
It's
can't
so
get away from it.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's actually impossible to truly feel love for somebody else when you're not feeling it for yourself. There's not a way to do that because you're
totally.
just in a bad vibrational space.
Well, and people can't really love you fully because
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
know how to love you because
Yeah.
you don't know how to love you. And
Mhm.
that's like a very real thing. So, I mean, we can even, so I was just talking about the 5 love languages today.
Oh, yeah.
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 There's a sixth one now. Did you
Oh, is
know?
there? I didn't know that.
Yes. So there's a new one, and it is being seen, which
Oh,
I
really?
think,
Oh, okay.
okay, interesting.
Hmm.
I think it kind of ties in with the words of affirmation. Um, but it we often think about, these 6 now love languages and our relationships with other people, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm.
I have never, just recently have I thought about the love languages and the relationship we have with ourselves.
Oh, it's inextricable as far as I'm concerned. You have to have the one in order to have the other.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I've just never thought about, it's so important that we give ourselves the love language that we need.
Because if you think about it, let's take, for instance, touch. That's one of the 5, the original 5, right?
Mhm.
If you are only interested in touch from somebody else, but you have no sense of touch within yourself, it's one of those things that you might get some value out of it for some period of time, but it's gonna go
Mhm.
flat real soon.
Oh,
Like,
totally.
you can't sustain it. It's not
Yeah, yeah.
possible.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's the same way as if, your significant other comes over and makes you dinner and cleans your house and tells you how
Mhm.
beautiful you are. But if your love language is time spent together or even gift giving, it's like you might not feel loved, even though this person is trying so desperately to love you, but they
Right.
don't know your love language. So when we show ourselves our love language, our partners, our future partners, however, I think this is a great space for people who are single because you are in this beautiful space to create this amazing relationship between yourself that you can then share with your future partner. So if you become a rock star at loving yourself, when you meet the right person, they're going to know 100% wholeheartedly how they can love you because you're going to model that for them, which is
You've
so
been very,
beautiful.
very eloquently describing what I've been working on for the last 6 months or so since my relationship, my marriage ended, because I
Okay.
realized, okay, it's time to invent Walt 2.0. I've gotta go
Totally.
back to, ground zero. I gotta start all over again, and I have to get back to working not that I'd ever really stopped, like you point out, it goes on forever, but
Sure.
I kinda need to, like, renew the commitment to loving myself,
Totally.
building myself, refocusing myself, deciding where I wanted to go, deciding what I wanted to do, and learning the basics about how to let go of all the anxieties and the frustrations, and
Mhm.
I'm scared that this isn't going to happen and all that kind of thing. I had to start all that over from scratch, and it's been terrifying and wonderful all at the same time.
I bet it's an adventure for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an
So
adventure
what
and it's a challenge. It's both.
Yeah, totally. Wait, so what kind of things have you been doing?
I've literally reinvented my entire life.
Yeah, what
Um,
are your non-negotiables, Walt? Tell me.
what are my non-negotiables? Interesting
Yeah.
one. Dance. I was a
Mm.
dancer before I met my ex. We were
What
together
kind of
for
dance?
24 years, and,
Okay.
early on, it was swing dancing, but almost any kind
Well,
of partner dancing.
okay.
And then I kinda stopped because she wasn't really into it, which was a big, big mistake
Mm.
that I made, and I've since
Yeah.
learned how much of a mistake that was. But I got back to that, and so when you just said the words non-negotiable, I said, "Well, that now is non-negotiable. I'm gonna be a dancer regardless of who I meet." And it's up to them to
Yeah.
decide whether or not they're okay with that because that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah. Aw, that's great. Yeah, and it can be things like that simple. Like, this is a
Yeah,
hobby that I really enjoyed that brought me happiness, and yeah, and
and
obviously your
and talk
partner
about the
should.
5 or now 6, love languages. It for me, dancing fulfills 1, 2, 3, at least 3 of them
Yeah, I can see that. So
because it
it's
has
funny
the
you said
touch.
It's funny you said dance.
It has a touch, it has, quality time, and to me, that's, like, the best
For
part, and
sure.
that's my number 1 love language is quality time. It has that in a huge way, and it has the affirmation piece,
Yeah.
because especially when you're taking the lessons, everybody's encouraging each other. I mean, what better affirmation can you get, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. I've always wanted to take, a dance class, like an
Oh, you
instruction dance
should.
class, but never have. So
Gotta
maybe
do it. It's so worth it.
this is now a non-negotiable for me. Like, I
There
need
you
to do
go.
this. I need to
Yeah,
do
do
this.
it.
No, that's
Oh,
great.
yeah,
I
it's
think
the best.
yeah, so, I mean, non-negotiables are, like, a great place to start, and
Yeah.
that's also is, like, living your true authentic self-expression. Like, these are things that you enjoy doing, and it's like, when we walk this path of doing the things that we wanna do, naturally, we are going to be led to the people and the opportunities that are just going to continue us along this path. It's like we don't have to search for things. We don't have to find things. It's like not that's not what it's about. It's about enjoying the ride, right? And then
Mhm.
the things find you because you're attracting.
I think part of it too, we've been talking about the non-negotiables. I think also the negotiables are important. I mean,
Okay.
just because they're negotiable doesn't mean that that we shouldn't figure out what it is that we really want there.
Mm,
I think we have a tendency to skip past that. Figure, well, I'll negotiate that later on. Well, how about exploring it now?
yeah.
That's been a big piece of what I've been going through the last 6, 7 months is I'm not going to let any of the stones remain unturned. I'm gonna turn them all over. I don't
Yeah.
know that I'm necessarily going to want to go with any of those things that I'm turning the stone over on, but I'm going to explore it.
Well,
I'm going to
that's kind of the curiosity piece,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Exactly.
That we can be scared of and shy away from because there's risk with
Right.
curiosity,
Yeah.
right? Like when you're discovering something new, when you're trying something new, when you're putting yourself out there, whatever that may look like for you, there's a lot of risk. And,
Good.
successful people, though, whether it's in business or relationships or whatever, they're risky. They take risks. Like someone who's successful has much more failures than they do successes. You just don't
Absolutely
see
true.
those,
Yeah.
right?
And that's kind of what I was faced with because it wasn't just my relationship that was ending. Literally, the relationship ending was like one of these domino things where everything just fell apart all at once.
Mm.
So my relationship was over. My income at that point was running my ex-wife's business. Of course, that was going away. My
Oh,
living space, we were in a rental that lease was about to be up. My vehicle was on its last legs. I mean, literally, there was like this
wow.
long list of all the basic standard stuff that's just part of this is your survival level of the pyramid, right?
Yeah.
All of it was basically thrown up into the air. And I
Mm.
had to navigate all of it all at once. Boy, it's not the best way to go. I don't recommend it, but it also is a great way to say, I'm going to focus on turning all of the rocks over. I don't know what the next opportunity is going to be. I don't know what's going to be the solution to any of those things. And by the way, most of them have already ironed themselves out during that time period. But because I went at it with, I'm just going to explore all of it, I didn't cut myself off. I
Mm.
think that's what we end up doing. We cut ourselves off because, well, that's negotiable. I can deal with that one later.
Mm.
No, that's putting
Yeah.
stuff off. That's not negotiating later. That's putting it off. That's just avoiding. And it's the avoidance that basically traps us.
Yeah. I think that's very clever. My mind is kind of like, "Oh, wow." Um, I that's something well, like you said, you were like, "I don't think we really give enough attention to these negotiables," and, like,
Mm,
figuring out, how do I feel about that?
yeah.
Like, are you familiar with human design?
I am barely familiar with it. One of my former co-hosts walked me through it, and I learned that what's the term? I am a manifesting generator.
Oh, I'm
But
the
I'm
same.
well, you are okay. All right. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure that I really know what that means, but at least I know what I am.
Well, and it's so in depth, and I am in no way a practitioner. I'm in no way an expert. I don't really know that much about it, but being a manifest generator, one of the things that I did learn was like it's so important for us to sit with decisions that we need to make in our lives and to see, how do we feel about it?
Yes. Boy,
Like
that's certainly true of me. Yeah.
Like, how do we actually feel? And I know in my life, I've made decisions and I've been, like, even sold to in ways that were like, "Gotta decide now, you gotta decide now." And most of the time when I'm in those situations, I make a bad choice.
Mm.
And so one of my non-negotiables, one of the things that I have learned to do, and maybe even you could put this in a negotiable category too, but one of the things that I've really learned to do is to pause and say, how do I will come back to you. How do
Mhm.
I really feel about this? And this could be as simple as like, hey, will you go to a party next weekend? And I have to say, let me see how I feel. Right. Because our word, and this is going to another thing, our words and the promises we make to other people and to ourselves are really linked to our confidence. Right.
Yes.
Like
Mhm.
it's tied directly to our confidence. So, anyway, back to human design. I've had to just learn that the manifest generators, like we're so good at manifesting, like we're very good. We're one of the best, but we have to really sit and feel and decide, and we have to give ourselves the time. So with these negotiable pieces, it's like probably some things you're able to decide really quickly, and maybe other things you really do have to come back and
Mhm.
look at later because you're just not ready to make the decision. And that's okay.
Yeah. It is okay, and it's also necessary. Maybe it is because of our particular type, this manifesting generating thing, which I still don't completely understand. But whatever it is, that's me. Okay, but
Well,
we're,
I think the whole idea is to like know when you're in alignment, right?
that's where I was going with this. Yeah,
Okay.
alignment.
Yeah,
Alignment
to
is exactly
know
the word,
when you're in
or
alignment.
congruence. Congruence
And
is the other word I was thinking about.
mm,
Because that
what I
congruence
d
basically means, anything that I'm examining, anything that I'm considering, anything that I'm doing, anything that I have thought about, I need to be congruent between that and how I feel about it. That's where the feeling piece comes in.
Mhm.
And if I don't get myself into that state of congruence, that's where I get into kind of what you talked about, where you feel pressured to kind of make a decision right now. By
Yeah.
the way, if somebody tries to do that with me now these days, like I get one of these high pressure, emails or something like that. Like, well, you better turn that off real fast, or else you're just going to lose me entirely. That's my attitude these days.
Totally, and it's completely changed, like, how I've ran my business, like, after I found out about human design, after I found out about my particular human design, it's completely changed the way that I market and the way that I
Mm,
sell,
hmm.
for sure. But so for us, each type of human design experiences, like, a different emotion when they're out of alignment, right?
Mm.
So it's can be, like, sadness or anger, but for the manifest generator, it's frustration.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, I'm on
Okay.
board with you there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's frustration. So having that piece of knowledge, I think everyone should look into human design. I think it's just another tool in your tool belt of all the different things that are now, offered to us. I recently learned about temperaments. So that was not something that I was familiar with. Like there's different types of temperaments.
Tell
Are
me
you
about that.
familiar?
I'm not familiar with that. Give me a clue.
Oh, okay, me either. All right. I feel better now. I'm not the only one. I was
Yeah, it's
sitting
safe. It's a safe zone. You're okay.
Yeah, I was sitting at Easter dinner and my husbands, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, all of his family had already had this conversation at a previous dinner that we
Mm,
weren't a part of. So I'm sitting there and I'm a communication major. Like I
mhm.
know, a lot about like, I mean, the love languages is one of the things that like, you learn about people and relationships. And anyway, I was very surprised that I had not heard of these temperaments, but there's 4 different temperaments. The names are really weird, so I don't
Okay.
even know the names. I'm gonna look up my
I'm
sister-in-law sent
curious now.
me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
Yeah,
had no idea that this even existed as a
this is
thing.
a thing, and I was like, "When was this, made?
Yeah.
Like, when was this created?" And she said it was created during, like, the ancient Greek times.
Really? Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
So this is a thing that has been going on for, like, a long time, and I mean, I took psychology classes, and I never heard about this. Oh my gosh, of course, I can't find it. But there's 4 different types, and it was so interesting because, the whole table knew what me and my husband were
Okay.
before there's, like, a test that you can take online, of course, and I'll send you that link, so maybe, like, our viewers can have
Yeah.
it.
Sure.
But there's 4 different kinds, and it was so interesting that my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, they all knew what we were before we even took the test, and they were totally right.
Oh, I
Um,
found them. The four are sanguine,
yes,
choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic.
there you go. There you go. And so I am let me see. It's like, of course, my text messages are all over the place because I wasn't right? I wasn't, but you can be more than one,
Okay.
and you can kind of it's like a percentage. So I was right down the middle. I was 2 different ones pretty split. Um, I am, like, determined to find this. Okay, I found it. So I am, a choleric and a sanguine, like, right down the middle.
Okay.
And it was so interesting because part of the qualities that they're talking about is, like, your, um the like how quick you can take action, like how and so my husband was not the same. He was and oh my god, I'm like butchering this because I don't remember the names. He
That's all
was
right.
the one, right? He was the one that he was very introspective, and
Okay.
he even like he's the type of person where he is even afraid to try, like, he
Uh,
won't even try because he's such a perfectionist, which is, like, so terrible, like, to be I mean, it's not terrible. The point is to
well, it
know
can be miserable. I mean, I've been there. I know what that feels like.
right, and so I am not that way. I am very
Mhm.
much, like, go with the flow, like, we'll just see what happens, we'll make it work, where that just makes him, like, oh my god, like, he wants to just run away, like, can't even but, so it's like it works really well that we are, opposites, but then it's also like we butt heads because we're opposites. Because I'm not like as patient with him as, I should be. But the point, and I don't even remember why I brought this up, but the point of knowing the temperaments is so that you can better understand yourself. It's so you
Mm,
can, give yourself some grace, and especially in relationships, it's like so beautiful to be able to understand your partners so you can, give them some grace and really kind of understand like where they're coming from. But this, I think, is another tool in your tool belt to be
yeah.
able to understand, what is my temperament? You apparently get them from your parents. So
Okay.
that's a real thing. But very interesting. I think that you would probably find it super interesting.
I'll have to check into it. Yeah, I was completely unaware. I had no idea that that even existed as a thing, but it does look somewhat interesting. And you're bringing it into the primary relationship, but I would imagine this also would be useful with any relationship. I mean,
Totally.
because any relationship has to do first and foremost with who you are,
Mhm.
and secondly, who you want to interact with or who you're choosing to interact with for whatever reason you're making your choice. And those relationships, I mean, what is there anything we don't have a relationship with? We have relationships with people, with machines, with planet, with cultures, with societal norms, with families. With I mean, the relationship list goes on and on and on.
On and on
There,
and on.
I don't think there's anything we don't have a relationship with. And anytime that we can learn anything that helps us with those relationships, we're growing. That is part of that self
Totally.
help, self growth process.
Yeah, I mean, that's the expansion.
Right.
And, one of my favorite phrases is, wisdom really begins when we admit that we don't know everything,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Mhm.
moment that you are admit that there's so much that I don't know, there's so much that I want to know, it puts you in a very receptive position. It's very different. It's very open versus, believing like you know everything.
It's also a great way I mean, everybody has their little peccadillos, right? Everybody has their little things. This is something I tend to do. This is a way I tend to behave that isn't always the best thing and so forth. But this position that you're describing right here, that's a way to avoid trapping yourself. Like, for
Mm,
instance, let's say that you're somebody who has a tendency to just, go try to tell everybody else how to live. Taking this position is going to kind of wean you off of that pretty quickly, actually, because it's really incompatible with that kind of way of expressing. And when we take that position that, I have so much to learn, I've learned so much, but there's so much more out there. That's that curiosity factor. It's that's what it is.
mm,
It's removing the judgment factor, is replacing it with a curiosity factor, because
totally.
the two are really incompatible. You can't be judgmentally curious. There's not a way to do that.
Right, right, right. Polar opposites. And I mean, when we step into this curiosity space and when we really begin to lead ourselves, that's what we become is a
Mm,
leader. And like, you don't even have to push your opinions onto other people because they're going to be influenced by you based on your happiness and your ability to lead, you know? I think like now in the world, it's like there's so many people who are trying to push their opinions, right?
Oh
Like
God.
in
Hey, I was
so
one
many
for
ways.
years, and I was really good at it, let me tell you.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, same, right? Like I was a vegan, like no offense. But all the things, it's like we live in this place where, you know, everyone, and I just think even more so now, like, I mean, when you look at the United States, it's like we are so divided, like we are so split. And I mean, politicians use it to their advantage and
Oh, of
really
course.
everyone, right? Like this is like a big marketing strategy that we use is trying to push your idea on other people. But when you're in your lane, right? And you're focused on yourself and you're focused on your happiness and you're not worried about what other people think. You're not worried about what other people are doing. It's like you really step into this leadership role. And I think before that, you know, we don't have any business saying, you know, what other people should do. I think really in any aspect, we don't ever have a opinion on what other people should do, but we should all aspire to be, you know, the leader in our own life. And hopefully when we give ourselves that permission, we're really going to give other people the permission to live, you know, their authentic life. I can say authentic again.
There you go. It's
Mhm.
funny because a lot of people are very concerned about the great political divide here in the U.S. and in other places around the world as well. I'm not worried about it, which sounds crazy to a lot of people. Now, part of that is because I have a background in political science, so I understand
Okay.
politics really good.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
part of it is because I appreciate this is the law of attraction side of it. I appreciate knowing what you don't want. And
Amen.
that's
Yeah.
what this thing has done more than anything else. It has opened people's eyes to, well, I really don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
And people are beginning to not just beginning, a lot of people are in the midst of a path of just growing away from that entirely. We're literally in the process of kind of like watching a slow motion crash. You know, like people like go to you know the car races because they like to see car crashes. It's that kind of a thing. But this is like the crash of interest in politics,
Mm.
and it's happening over a long period of time, but it's happening. It's an institution that it's going to be with us for quite some time, but everybody's just kind of getting less and less interested. Like, oh, that again? Yeah, okay. I don't have any more time for that. It's an
Yeah.
entirely new way. This did not exist 50 years ago. It didn't exist 100 years ago. You know, the
Right.
only real option over the last actually throughout the life of the United States as a country, and you could probably find similar parallels in other countries as well, has been a growth toward the divide. This is
Mm.
the first time in the country's history where people are saying, "Yeah, no thanks, not interested."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we're in different times being that we have the internet, right? Like
Yeah,
you're able to there's so many different voices now too. But going back to knowing what you don't want, which
mm,
is such an important piece of the puzzle, you know,
yeah,
that's really like the first step in manifesting,
it
in
is.
being in alignment, in, you know, you need to know like what you want and what you don't want. And most people like don't even know what they want.
Exactly right. Yes, and in fact, that's actually a great description of where we are in this shift process is going on because
Mm.
people have really clearly identified, no, I don't want that. But like you say, a lot of them haven't really figured out what they want instead. That's what we're in the process of doing right now as a population. Some people have
Yeah.
figured it out more, some have barely even looked at it. There's like a range of responses there, but that's where we're at right now. What do we want instead? What would we prefer to this whole divide thing? Some people can tell you specifically what they want, others can't. Some people can give you some idea, but ultimately that's what we're in the process of doing, trying to identify for ourselves, which will ultimately translate to for the society as a whole, but for ourselves, what do I want instead? What if I'm not going to be a political animal, what kind of animal am I going to be?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that autonomy is power,
Yeah.
right? Like being able to step into that space and saying, you know, I'm going to decide what I
Mhm.
want.
Yeah.
Very different, very beautiful. We're
Yeah.
in this huge shift right now, for
It's
sure.
fun to watch.
It is.
It really is.
It's
It's
very
kind of exciting.
exciting.
Yeah. And I often say, I mean, I see it a lot just because of the guests I have here on the show, because obviously I'm going to
Sure.
tend to have people on who are, they're movers and shakers and they're making all these things happen in their own lives and so on and so forth. Great stories to tell. But I mean, even when I just look at I don't spend a lot of time looking at the news or looking at the entertainment or culture, that kind of thing. But when I do look at it, I see it happening. I see it happening in every facet of society. It's happening
Mhm.
in religion. It's happening in the news. It's happening in popular entertainment. It's happening in the movies. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. 50 years. If when I was a kid, if you had told me that was going to happen, I would say, yeah, what have you been smoking? It was not an
Yeah.
option.
No, totally. Well, I mean, and even in my lifetime, like I'm one of the last, so I'm 33 to put into perspective. So
Okay.
I'm one of the last generations, like I grew up without the internet. Like
Mm,
we got the internet when I was like going into college pretty much.
right.
Like I had a
Right.
cell phone as a young adult. I was like 20 years old when I got my first
Hmm.
cell phone.
Hmm.
So the amount of perspectives and the amount of information and the amount of all the things, like, you can't run a news article that isn't how do I want to say it? Like, before you used to be able in like 30s, 40s, 50s, you could run a news article and it was like there was this picture and you just thought it was true, right?
Mm.
Like they
Oh
could
yeah.
really set it up. And I mean,
Pure
obviously the
acceptance.
news, yeah, is like you can't trust the news. We know that.
Mm.
But now it's like someone has a rally and there's 3 people there and they take a picture and make it look like there's a bunch of people. You're gonna have, you know what I mean? Like you're gonna have other people there with cell phones. Like, it's the autonomy. It's wanting to, tell the truth. It's wanting people to not be, pushed down by, and this is taking a very different turn than than I was anticipating. The
It's always a different
conversation.
term from what I don't. That's why I've learned not to anticipate. Just don't even go there. All you do is mess yourself up.
But well, but it's just like this beautiful illustration of, people wanting to be informed and to like,
Mm,
like people I think are just tired of not having, the opportunities that they should have and not being
mhm.
told to like sit down and be quiet. Like
Yeah.
that's just not what they want to do. People don't, I mean, even just like in my generation, you still like went to college, like you
Mhm.
graduated from high school and then you went to college. And then this is when people started being in exuberant debt. Like college got way expensive when
Oh yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
2008 is when like everything kind of like the colleges really skyrocketed. And now people are smarter. Like now people aren't like that isn't the what most people are doing, what most young adults are doing.
By the
They're
way, there's
finding
another area that politics is being charged because politics has driven this whole idea of
mm,
everybody should go to college. I mean, everybody
well,
deserves.
yeah.
Everybody has a right to a college education. Everybody should be funded and so forth. And
Mhm.
that is now being challenged, not as if it were wrong, but as if it were really, is that where I want to go? Is
It's
that
very
really good? Is that
limiting.
me?
Yeah. Well, and I was one of those people. I mean, I went to college, like I got a 4-year degree, I graduated with a bunch of debt, then there was no job for me. I was a
Mm,
communication major. I don't even
yeah.
really know what that meant at the time. I Right? And it was really like I just didn't wanna look like a failure. I didn't
Mhm,
want my family to think that I was the first one. Like, my parents don't have 4-year degrees.
mhm,
My older brother doesn't have a 4-year degree. Like, it was
mhm,
me. I'm the one who has the bachelor's degree.
mhm.
And I think I can say, it didn't help me, but I don't really know if it helped me because I was a communication major. I do have my own business, but I could be just as well off as if I studied under a photographer. Like I could, do you know what I'm saying? And so now, like lots of people are taking that route, which is so much smarter.
I know exactly what you mean, and in fact, the way I've expressed it to myself was I I totally understand. I knew when I was graduating, I could tell very quickly that the promises that had been made to me weren't true for the exact same reason you did. I mean, literally, when I came out of school, that was during the hyperinflation. So
Okay.
there was nothing. There were no jobs available, and plus I had a relatively non-useful major. I'd been a political science major. Well, what are you going to do with that? Well, you're either going to become a politician or you're going to become a lawyer. And I wasn't going to become either
Mhm.
one. So I mean, it was basically useless from that perspective. So the mantra that you must go to college in order to get a good paying job, I knew was not true, and that's what you know. Millions of people are now finding that is not true. That
Right.
is a myth that's based on a study that's over 40 years old, for goodness sake, that has never been challenged. I still can't believe that part. But anyway, that they're realizing that that is true. What is true also is that despite the fact that the college education may not have panned out the way we were promised to,
Mm.
it does provide other useful information. It just doesn't play out the way you kind of expected it that it would. So while it didn't lead to me getting a job, it did give me perspective that I
Sure.
didn't have. That perspective helped me, for instance, to understand why I want to leave the political system behind.
Mm. Yeah.
Literally, that and it took me years to learn that. Actually, long after I graduated, it took me that long to it took me like 20, 30 years after I graduated to kind of piece the whole thing together and say, this is a no-win game. I don't care
Mm.
what your stance is. I don't care whether you're liberal, conservative, libertarian, statist, authoritarian, dictator. I don't care what you are. It's a losing game for everybody. It took me a while to get there, but I'm grateful that I got that education for that perspective because that did help me to understand that. I don't think I would have gotten there without having that degree. So the degree didn't actually get me a job, but boy, did it help me form who I am.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, even just the experiences of being able to like be off on your own and
Yeah.
like you learn a lot about relationships. You learn a lot about friendships. You learn a lot about, the responsibilities of being,
Mhm.
Doing what you say you're going to do and things like that. And I did very well in college. I
Mhm.
made Dean's List. It was important to me.
Mhm.
But I remember picking communication and my main focus was going to be mass communications. So I wanted
Mm.
to like be a news anchor. That was what
Okay.
I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yes. And it turned out that in the program, there wasn't like they had already accepted enough people and they were down a teacher. And so I didn't end up being able to do that.
No, okay.
So that didn't really seem fair. But I ended up doing public relations,
Uh-huh.
which, is all about talking to people. It's about press releases. It's about presenting things the way that you want them to be perceived, as opposed to, it's creating the narrative,
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
So I'm always like, I can't say college wasn't useful because of everything you were saying and then everything about the responsibility and all of that. I just wish it wasn't so damn expensive.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Well, there's the major cost that gets associated with it, and by the way, what we're talking about, it is not just about college education. I'm thinking, for instance, of people who not only did they not go to college, but they went through some horrible times. The people who ended up homeless, or people who
Mm,
they were never really able to figure out what they wanted to do, and they're still 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years later, they're still trying to figure it out, and they aren't getting
right.
anywhere, and they don't have the relationship they're looking for, and their health is failing, and
Well,
like this
and
long list of things. And we tend to think like, well, God, I'm a failure. Nothing, this is all such a waste of time. And the answer is no. There's so much value in all of that you're experiencing. You may not like it. You certainly would never want to relive it.
yeah.
But if we can find, there's always value in there. When we can find that value, that's when we grow. That's when we improve. That's when life gets better because we
Oh,
found the
totally.
value.
Well, and I think, the value is always in hindsight,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, throughout my life, there have been so many things that seemed like real unfortunate circumstances, but then in hindsight, they were actually blessings.
Mm.
In hindsight, it was like it was perfect. The universe was saying, this you told me what you want, but like it's going to be even better.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's going to actually be better. You just need to get through this tough season. I'm making you into the person you need to be in order to experience something even better.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yeah, I feel very you mentioned people, not knowing, what they wanted to do or like not having their passion, right? Like later on in life. And that to me is like so sad. I can't even that's something I don't often think about. I'll
Mm.
be honest with you because I have been on this, trajectory for the past 10 years. And I became a professional photographer when I was 23. And
Mm.
it's like all I do. I live, I breathe. Like I just my joke is like I live, I breathe, I am boudoir. Like that is
Okay.
what I love, it's what I do. And I mean, I wasn't always just the boudoir photographer, but I always worked with people and I always did something creative through photography. So I think that if people are not living, in a way that they feel fulfilled, then that should be like your number one goal of every day, I would think.
Mm.
It's like, what, opportunities can I make today to maybe uncover more of my purpose? and more of where I can find meaning and more of where, I can, because, when we find the purpose, it's like we're always going to be influencing people in a positive way.
Mm.
Like always, if you're finding, exactly what you're supposed to do, exactly what you feel aligned with, if you're lit up inside, it's always going to be connected to benefiting other people. You just need to find, like what is that way? And I mean, I think you do it through the, curiosity that we were mentioning, right? Like uncovering the stones.
You mentioned a little while ago that we were on a conversational attack, if you will, that you really didn't anticipate this. You didn't think it was going to go in this direction. I'm going to propose the idea. This actually does flow very nicely out of what you do, because we originally were talking about the boudoir photography and how you
Yeah.
became a photographer and you're working with other photographers. And what we've really been talking about are the kinds of things you have to grow on when you're working in any field, when you're doing any kind of work. So let's tie it back. Let's tie it back to the world of the boudoir photographer. I mean, people have all of these different, very diverse life experiences going on that they say don't really tie in. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with being a photographer. And my reply is, well, yeah, it does, because it's how you became you. And
Totally.
you are the photographer. There's no boudoir photography without you. It doesn't happen without you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's a huge piece of it. And I imagine, I'm going to guess here, I'm going to go out on a limb. I imagine that it informs directly how you're interacting with those clients who are deciding to take this step, to do this photography, to hire you to help them
Oh,
accomplish
totally.
this next thing.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, it's like who I am. The interesting thing about boudoir photography is, so where my mind just went is like I'm thinking about, one of the things that I teach, being a photographer with my clients. Like, so not only do I take, beautiful pictures of these people, I also teach them, how to dress themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how to look, like what colors are going to be good for you, what cuts are going to be good for you,
Mm-hmm.
and then once you're here in my studio, I just make you feel like you are a celebrity for the day.
Mm-hmm.
I really like put on a show for you. And so, I'm always exhausted. Like after a boudoir shoot, I'm like, and it's a 4-hour experience. It's a
Oh,
long
wow.
day, right?
Yeah.
So it starts with hair and makeup. Okay. And that's an hour. And then I photograph them for an hour, and then they get to see their pictures the same day. So
Okay.
it's like this beautiful orchestrated photo shoot experience. So I call it an experience because, it's so much more than just getting your picture taken. But this ties in because throughout my life, so I was an actress for a long time. I did musical theater.
Mm.
I explored like so many paths of, I painted, and I always did photography. I was in the dark room when I was in high school, but the creative part, the performative part of me comes through so clearly and so beautifully when I'm taking pictures, because it's so important that I make these people feel comfortable. Right. And like the way that you make, because these people are vulnerable, like,
Right.
like people don't come in being like, I'm beautiful, I'm here for my photo shoot. No, people come in like, am I in the right
Mm.
place?
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Right? They're so nervous. Even though I've told them everything that's going to happen, I give them this beautiful prep guide so that they know I really have to be the energy, right?
Mm.
I have to be there to say, you are in the right place. You are welcome here. You are safe here. This is such a beautiful outfit. You did so well. So I really have to be there to put on this show and make these people feel so good. And throughout my life, if I didn't explore all of these different pathways, right? Like if I didn't explore being in the school play, I was Peter Pan in the school play.
Oh.
It's just so funny. My husband always makes fun of me for it. If I didn't explore all of these different avenues, if I didn't, chase my curiosity, it's like I for
Mm-hmm.
sure would not be who I am. Like I for
Mm.
sure would not be able to do what I do. And like I had no idea during the time that like this would lead me here.
Yeah.
Right? Like I had no idea. Even when I became a photographer, I still like also had like I started my business and still had a part-time job.
Mm.
There was still part of me that was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this work. It's really
Sure.
expensive to be a photographer. Like insurance
Mm-hmm.
is expensive, the gear is expensive, the
Yeah.
subscriptions, like all of it. Um, But I think like the energy and like the battery that I have to continually charge, it's like totally fueled on these other avenues that I have explored throughout my lifetime and that like I find inspiration in, which
Plus
is
the fact that you've explored those and know them and understand that journey so well, I suspect that really makes it a whole lot easier for you to connect to the client because the client has their own stuff that they've been growing through and their stuff. I mean, you're talking about how it's a very vulnerable situation to be in, to be engaging in that kind of
Mhm.
photography. It means that you're tapping into all these other vulnerable things, these uncomfortable things from the past that you don't even want to talk about during a shoot, for goodness sake, let alone, with somebody that you barely even know, but it's still influencing you as you're going through this. That's why you're so afraid. That's why you need the
Yeah,
photographer to come in and kind of draw you out because you're dealing with all that stuff. It's informing the
totally.
whole situation.
Totally. And I mean, people don't sign up to do this until they are like mentally ready. Like
Mm,
it's, so there's like the physical aspect where women will say, I need to lose 10 pounds. I need to do this. I need to do that. But ultimately, it's this mental block that
yeah.
people have to get through. And a lot of it is like people just don't think they're worthy of this
Mm,
experience. They
mhm.
just don't think like they are special enough to be celebrated in
Yeah.
artwork. Like they don't think that they have that potential. And the truth is, I mean, I tell everyone, I'm like, if you speak English and you have a body, I'm here for you.
There you
Like
go.
those are the prereqs. Like if you don't speak English, I can't help you.
It's kind of tough. Yeah.
It would be very difficult.
Yeah.
But that's it. So it doesn't really matter like what season in your life. It doesn't matter how old you are. You're as young as you've ever gonna be. You're as old as you've ever been. Let's do this. Let's do it. All you have to do is decide that like you are mentally ready to do this and you can do it. And it's one of these things that like when people sign up and then they actually follow through, their confidence immediately gets built simply because they said they were going to do something and they did it.
It did it. Yeah.
Because,
Mhm.
that's our I mean, we kind of talked about this earlier, but I mean, our confidence is really like this credit score that we keep with ourselves.
Mm,
Every time you tell yourself you're going to do something, if you don't do it, it gets a little bit lower. And I
mhm.
mean, for me, most of the time, this is like health stuff. I think for a lot of people, most of the
Sure.
time, it's like I'm going to eat better. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go for a walk. And these are things that we really want to do when we're like laying in bed at night. We're like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do better. I really want to do this. I'm feeling very inspired to do this tomorrow. I will do it. And then we get busy, right? I have
The
kids.
day happens.
The day happens. And so when we continually tell ourselves that we're going to do something, we don't do it, our confidence just completely
Mm,
collapses. And
yeah.
so, Boudoir is so unique because we get this beautiful visual that,
Mhm.
wow, I mean, everyone I photograph, and I'm sure this is true for, most good boudoir photographers, everyone who sits in front of their pictures is like, I cannot believe that's me. Right. Because you're
Mm,
being professionally posed by
sure.
someone, right? This is in a beautiful curated studio. Like
Mhm.
there's so many pieces to the puzzle. But what really makes the difference, what really is the point and the value is the confidence that comes from doing something that was hard, that you didn't
Yeah.
know how you were going to do it. Oh my gosh, is that a kitty?
That's a cattail, yes. That's Joy's tail.
Oh my gosh, it's perfect. Um, but the confidence really comes from, doing something that was hard and you did it.
Mhm.
And this could be anything. It could be like my husband just ran a marathon.
Oh, wow.
And he's done like right? So, to him, it's not a big deal because he's ran like 50-mile races before.
Mm.
So it's so funny. He's like never ran a marathon, but he's ran much bigger races.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but to him, I'm like, "John, this is such a big deal." Like to
Mm.
I tell him all the time, I'm like, "I will never run a marathon. I will not do it. I just have no interest in doing it. I don't wanna do it." So I'm like, to most people, this is a huge accomplishment, but to him, he's like, "Whatever." But he did it because he wanted that validation, that
Mhm.
self-validation, which is, what we should all be seeking
And
is
you're
the
touching on
self.
something really important. We need to celebrate our accomplishments. We do have a tendency to
Absolutely.
undermine them in a bit.
That's a big thing.
Yeah,
And that's how we tap into that success energy.
that's
That's
right.
how we continue. Are you familiar with Mind Powers by
Not by
John?
name, no.
Oh, write this down. You would
Okay.
love it. Okay, so it's originally a book. by John Kehoe,
Okay.
Kehoe.
Okay.
It's amazing. So I'm actually taking he has a course also. So my
Okay.
husband read the book. He's like, "You're gonna love it." This is 10 years of learning about, energies, your vibration, like all the things.
Right.
Um, you know, 10 years ago, I heard Abraham Hicks for the first time, and I was
Mm.
like, "This lady's crazy, but I love her." Like, this is so weird, but I'm here for it. So John Kehoe in Mind Powers is the name of the book. He really breaks down actionable steps and it's really good. But so the book is like, do these things. And then the course is like, do these 5 tasks for 2 minutes a day. So I'm halfway through. I highly
Okay.
recommend it. But my husband
Okay.
read the book first and he's like, you're going to love it. You have to read it. And then I got the first 2 chapters and I was like, this is the best book ever. And then
Ah,
I got the course, really liked it. But so today we finished lesson 3 and in lesson 3, one of the things we had to do was we had to write down and the whole point of this is to be able to, manifest what we want, to
okay.
actually be able to have our inner world. So he describes it as 2 worlds. We have our
Mhm.
outer world, which is the
Mhm.
things that are happening to us, and then we have our inner world.
Mhm.
And in our inner world, in our conscious and our subconscious, we constantly react, right, to what
Mhm.
happens to us. But what's outside is actually a reflection of what's inside,
Yeah.
right? Which we all
Right.
know. And so today in the lesson, we had to write down 20 things acknowledging things that we liked about ourselves that were true. So
Okay.
these aren't things that we want to happen. These are things that have already happened
Mm.
because we don't spend enough time celebrating
Yeah.
ourselves, right? Like
True.
how often does we work towards a goal and we finally reach it and we're like, okay, next goal.
Yeah, right. Just skip over that part.
Well, and it's only human, right? It's like in
Yeah.
our nature. That's how we've become so innovative. That's how we've gotten to where we are in our own lives and society, like however it is. But we have got to acknowledge ourselves. Because that's the easiest way to tap back into that energy.
Mm.
So, the saying like success brings more success.
Right.
Couldn't be like it's so true. Like couldn't be
Mhm.
more than true. And that's what this list of acknowledgments does. So, and we can tie this back to love languages. So, one of my love languages is words of affirmation.
Okay.
Okay. So, I really love being told nice things. That's just what it is. I don't know
Sure.
why. It's just what it is. And so, with the acknowledgement list, it was a complete way for me to have this introspection love with myself to be able to take a
Yeah.
moment and say, and you can put it is first of all, it's kind of hard to come up with 20 things,
You have to really work it
right?
if you haven't done it before.
Yep,
Yeah.
you have to really work it, but you can write down things like, "I am a good dresser."
Mhm.
Like, "I
Mhm.
am a good cook." "I am a good parent," things like that. So, some of the things are like, "I'm a good wife," blah, blah, "I'm organized," or whatever. And then, some of the things are like, I have awards. Like I'm an award-winning photographer and like
Okay.
things, that you've just succeeded in business. But what I found, so we were supposed to look at this for 2 minutes. And the other exercises that we had to do it's like 2 to 5 minutes, they took forever. Right. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even. So you're learning like how to contemplate. That's like a
Yeah.
big thing.
Mhm.
And, that takes practice. You're training your mind basically to think the
Right.
thoughts that you want it to think. But
Yeah.
he has the exercises
That's
that
cool.
you can do. I loved it. As someone who has really explored, I think this world like pretty deeply, like more in depth than I would say most people. I thought this was for at least for me, very analytical
Yeah.
mind over here. But anyway, it was really, really amazing. And so I had to look at this list for 2 minutes and it just went by so fast. And I was
Mm.
able to like really get into it for whatever reason. That was like such a wonderful exercise for me. So yeah, celebrating.
Obviously, I haven't done mind powers, but I've done similar kinds of things. Well, I mean, you get
Yeah,
enough guests on this show, you're gonna get all kinds of stuff, thrown your way,
sure.
you
Yeah.
know? But, one of the things that I noticed the first time I did that kind of activity
Mhm.
was like you were describing. It's the first 5 or 10 that you come up with, it's a challenge, and then somewhere along the line, you kinda break through, and all of a sudden, there's this flow. Like,
Yeah.
you can't write them down fast enough. Did you
Yeah.
experience that?
Yeah, in a way, and I also found myself being like, well, why can't I be a good dresser?
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
Like these expansive
Mhm.
questions, right? Which is
Mhm.
like so important when we're trying to lift our, negative thoughts or
Mhm.
negative vibrations are these
Mhm.
expansive questions. Well, like why can't I, be a good cook? Like why can't like I can do that.
Mhm.
Right? And that's like the confidence. That's like
Yeah.
the positivity. That's, being like okay with celebrating yourself, which is so important.
There was a line that came up in the movie The Post, the story of the Pentagon Papers and the Washington Post
Mm.
publishing that. The movie came out a few years back. And one of the lines in the movie was, "The only way to assert the right to publish is to publish." And I thought, wow,
Mm.
that applies to so many things. The only way to develop self-love is to develop self-love.
Yeah,
I mean,
true. It's absolutely
you
true.
can take the same two blanks and you can fill it in with a whole bunch of stuff, but that's one of the really big ones. If you want to develop self-love, if you want to develop self-confidence, you have to sit down and develop self-love and self-confidence.
Oh, it is a practice,
Yeah.
right? And it takes discipline and it takes time. Like, I mean, as humans, we always want to like, imagine it'd be so nice if I could just do this, right? Like we would rather imagine even like doing the laundry. Like
Yeah.
the amount of times I have like visualized doing it and I could have just already done it,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Could have just done it, but I didn't do it. It's easier to just think about doing it.
I hear
Um,
you.
but yeah, I mean, and that's the evolution and growth over a lifetime. It's
That's right.
not something, right, that you do for a week or you do for a year. It's something that you do forever because I think, our interests and our desires change. Like they evolve with us. Like what we desire now is going to be very different in 5 years. If we actually work towards our goal, like naturally we're going to want, different thing. They don't I want to immediately I thought like bigger and better, but I'm like it doesn't have to be like bigger
Not
and better.
necessarily. Could be.
Yeah. It could be for sure,
Mhm.
but it could also just be different and
Mhm.
we weren't ready for it 3
Mhm.
years ago, you
Yeah,
know?
right. This has been really a fascinating conversation. I'm looking up and saying, "Oh my god, the hour's up
You
already?
know.
That's not fair." But a couple things I gotta do before we finish for the day, because I wanna
Yeah.
make sure I get these in. First of all, if somebody wants to reach out and find Emily Sacco and learn more about you, maybe even have a conversation with you, maybe pick your brain about photography or becoming a boudoir photography, or how do I find a boudoir photographer near me? What do I look for? If they wanna have a conversation, how do they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very active on Facebook. That's a wonderful place to find me. You can just
Mhm.
search Emily Sacco. You can search Emily Sacco Boudoir. And there's several different pages that are going to come up. And then I'm also on Instagram at Emily Sacco Boudoir. And I know a lot of people are like, don't DM me, but I and my assistant are in my DMs all the time. So you
Yeah.
are welcome to private message me.
Okay.
You're welcome to reach out to me. Yes. And then, online, my website is emilysacco.com. We have contact forms there. There's information about coaching if you're a photographer. And then, of course, I mean, maybe someone is like, I need a boudoir shoot, and I'm here for that too.
Okay, cool. That's great. I love that. And then you're gonna love the last one because you mentioned that your love language, your top love language is affirmation. This is gonna feed you in a
Oh,
way.
okay.
Like I do this with everybody, but I can tell this is just gonna hit you perfectly. Because like I mean, everybody who comes onto the show is a giver, and you are a giver. You come onto the show because you have all this information to share, and you want to share your experience and all these great things you learned along the way. And I'm sure this is not the only podcast you've done. I'm sure you've done other podcasts. You have other outlets. You do the social media. I mean, you write articles. Who knows? I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you do, just putting things out to help people. And there are going to be many people that you've never met, you never will meet, you'll never see, who saw something or read something or picked something up that you put out there, and it's happened over and over and over again, and you've never found out about it. Well, we don't get recognized for that, and I think we should be. So, on behalf of those people that you'll never meet and that you'll never see, thank you for all that you've been doing and that what you're
Oh,
continuing to do, because it makes all
yeah.
the difference in the world.
I love that. No, it's so true. It's like the amount of people that are watching silently.
Yeah.
There's been so many memes about that recently that I've seen. But yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, I can tell you, sorry, I'm like going off on a tangent again. I
That's
can
we do
be
that all the time, no big deal.
Well, So because I'm a local business, it's like I will see people like in stores
Mm.
and things. And I've had several people come up to me and be like, I love when you go live. And like
Oh,
one of
that's
the things
nice.
that I'll talk about is, being mindful and like
Mhm.
having transition periods. So like, before I sat down, I was like, this is going to be a wonderful podcast. It's going to be perfect. It's going to be in alignment. I'm going to know what to say. And like I'm transitioning to that now. After we sign off, I'm going to go home. So I'm going to park in my driveway and I'm going to say, it's time for me to be with my children.
Mhm.
I'm going to be the best mom that I can be. I'm going to set like my expectations for myself, right? Like what do I want to happen? Anyway, so I had people come up to me and be like, I love that you do that. I think that's really great. You've inspired me. And the only thing I'm thinking is like, you've never liked any of my things. Like, I know your name. Our kids go to preschool together, and, like, you have never commented or liked anything. But, of course, I didn't say that. But,
Sure.
and we shouldn't be seeking outward validation. But it's just so funny. I don't know. I try really hard to like things and to, when it is meaningful for me. If
Mhm.
something, was actually beneficial, I try really hard to, let people know because I think it's so important. So that was beautiful. And I really appreciate that, Walt. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're quite welcome, quite welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for doing all the things that you do, 'cause, very much appreciated.
Yeah,
And,
my pleasure.
yeah, I mean, it's a great thing. And, I wanted to also mention something else too. What you were
Yeah.
just describing, you mentioned Abraham Hicks, and I totally get what you said when you said they seem kinda crazy.
A little
They
out
call
there.
that
I love it.
pre-paving. Oh, I do too. I love her, yeah. But what you were describing, they call that pre-paving. Where
Oh,
you imagine in advance what you're gonna be doing, how you want it to go out. That's
yes.
pre-paving your intentions.
Love
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So, cool stuff. So, thank you very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.